Back on the news feed, PM, as thousands of travellers gear up to visit different destinations this festive season, the Parliament Portfolio Committee on Trade, Industry and Competition is calling for a probe into what it says are unreasonably high ticket prices. The committee says the airlines have made it difficult for travellers to afford flight tickets. Let's get a response to these allegations. Now I'm joined by one of those airlines implicated, FlySafair, and its Chief Marketing Officer, Kirby Gordon, joins me for reaction. Kirby, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. It seems lawmakers are asking the watchdog to watch you as airlines, because there seems to be what they believe is unfair practices as far as pricing is concerned. How, firstly, do you react to this call that is being made by members of Parliament?
Well, I think, firstly, we welcome it. I think it's wonderful to have these organs that we have available to us that do keep everyone honest, and we're big advocates of that. First off, we welcome the involvement from the Competition Commission and the inquest. I think it's also going to be an amazing opportunity to ventilate a lot that's going on in our space at this stage. The reality is actually a story of two halves. On the one hand, it has become more expensive to fly relative to the increase of cost of living since COVID. There are a number of factors that relate to this, and specifically it's become more expensive for us to actually operate flights. In the first 6 months of 2022, for example, the price of fuel, which makes up about half of the cost of operating a flight, went up 45%. We as a country no longer produce all the jet fuel that we need. It's no longer synthesized in South Africa. We are now net importers of that fuel. You can imagine that also has a cost implication to it. So the story on the one hand is very much about an actual increase in the cost to produce flights and ergo the cost of flying. But equally, it's actually also about airlines looking for survival. And it's quite interesting to note that Lift Airlines actually took us to the Competition Commission quite recently in order to accuse us of an act called predatory pricing, which is an opportunity where you actually price below what is feasible to actually do business at. This was reviewed by the Competition Commission and of course dismissed because that's not the fact. So you've got this interesting scenario where we've got a parliamentary committee that is saying it's too expensive for South Africans to fly, but equally competitors who are saying that we're pricing too low, and that they can't actually run sustainable businesses by implication.
Yeah. So the chairperson saying you are masquerading as low-cost airlines when in actual fact you are making travel unaffordable. Never mind the fact that you have displaced South African Airways out of the local market in particular, but you are not pricing any lower than what I suppose South African Airways would have done.
Well, no, I mean, I think South African Airways, as a specific example, is alive and well. I mean, we're all very aware, and you've been reporting on what's been happening in their environment, but they are active in the market. And I think we all compete on a very even playing field. We are a low-cost airline. I think there's a lot of understanding that needs to go into what a low-cost airline means. It's around the way that you build your business model. It's about how you manage your costs as an airline, and the implication or the intention is certainly to put out the lowest fares. South African Airways, as an example, is what we call a full-service carrier. So they offer a much higher level of basic service than what we would, included meals, included checked baggage, all those sorts of things. But they, should be able to charge accordingly for it, and hopefully people are willing to pay that. But the reality is we still remain the least expensive airline in the country, and we're doing the very best that we can to maintain that position.
So are you saying it today, I mean, if the market inquiry certainly would be conducted as Parliament is calling for it, you're saying your prices compared to what the national carrier would charge are still lower, as you say, coming into the industry? You are a budget airline.
100%. We absolutely are lower, and the product is more basic as well. So, I mean, I think the two work together, if that makes sense. So there certainly is a much lower barrier to access for a consumer to fly with a low-cost airline, and that is the basis of our model.
So the other issue, particularly with FlySafair, that is coming about, especially from the Portfolio Committee, is your foreign shareholding, which are saying, one, it's non-compliant with the International Air Service Council. That's what the chairperson says. But also, this could also be a contributing factor towards the higher pricing, where you're trying to get some value for your shareholders.
Well, I mean, for starters, unfortunately, it's a bit difficult for me to talk to this at length. The matter is in court at the moment. That is the finding of the chairperson. Interestingly enough, if one actually looks at the acts, the reality is that we're not looking at shareholding at all. In fact, ownership or shareholding are not terms that appear in the acts at all. What they really are about is about voting rights and an active and effective control of an air services license. So understandably, the matter is still sub judice and is under review at the moment. But the reality is that this exact argument really holds no water either. It really goes both ways. You've got Miles van der Merwe from Seme, who is pontificating about how we're losing 100 million rand a month and bleeding 1.2 billion that a shareholder is supposedly plowing into the airline. Not true, and obviously also subject to that earlier Competition Commission case that I spoke to. But equally now you've got a portfolio committee saying that we're price gouging in order to serve a foreign owner. I mean, these two things are just conflicting, and neither of them are realities.
How do you see that particular court challenge? I mean, he reads it, and these are his words, as you trying to block a particular report. Are you trying to block a report on what's happening in the industry?
No, I don't think that is a particularly informed comment on the matter. At the moment, the finding has been made. The process that is outlined in the Act, the chairperson has communicated her decision, and that process is still ongoing. There is a challenge inherent to it in terms of the process at this stage, not even necessarily the context of the actual decision. That is still ongoing. And so at this stage, as I say, there's very little I can say about the specifics of the argument that are there. But I don't think that it's very valid to say that anyone's seeking to block anything. To my knowledge, in terms of the proceedings, that's not what's going on.
How do you then see your participation in the industry, but also a South African Airways that's trying to forge a comeback? And the argument is that you are, of course, a deterrent to that comeback of South African Airways in terms of how you're operating. Is there space for yourselves as budget airlines to exist while South African Airways is forging this comeback from business rescue?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the reality in countries around the world. You know, every country that has airlines operating in it has, budget airlines or low-cost airlines that exist next to full-service carriers. There's very much a space for all of the solutions that these various carriers bring to the markets that they serve. Obviously, the strength of each company is based on their ability to run their business well. It's interesting to note in South Africa, we often speak about, post-COVID, there being less competition than there was beforehand. There's actually just as many companies contesting the market now as there were before COVID. The brands are different because Comair used to operate both Kulula and British Airways, and then you had South African Airways existing as South African Airways and as Mango. But when you look at the number of companies actually still contesting the market, there are as many today as there were pre-COVID. So the reality is that competition is still very much alive and well in our market. There's opportunities for everyone. We've seen growth from various different carriers. Lyft, by way of example, only came into play post-COVID. So if you, it's like any business. If you approach it well and you do it well, there's very much opportunity for success.
Yeah. I suppose the lawmakers would want the regulator to do something similar to what, for example, we are seeing in a state-owned entity like Eskom, where there is a regulator that regulates the pricing of these tickets, especially for budget airlines, and to make travel affordable for the locals, for the nationals of South Africa. How would the industry react to that degree of regulation?
Well, I think it would need to be very carefully considered, and I'm sure that there are people who, that are paid more than I am, that would be looking at that and understanding the basics of that. I think the reality is that something like electricity, which is an essential service, is a little different to something like aviation or air travel. Whilst it is a very important service and certainly something that that maintains an economy at large, it's not something that is required for basic living conditions. So certainly, I would imagine that a different set of laws would apply to that. Equally, I think there's a very strong argument to say that we have a very robust institution in the Competition Commission, which governs all industries across the board, including ourselves. And hence why I say, welcome the involvement by them, and we really celebrate the fact that we have these institutions in place that hold all companies across all verticals to become honest and to be honest about what they are serving. I think that, this is really an opportunity to allow that body to exercise its powers and its capabilities, to do the investigation, and then to trust and believe in the outcome if we believe that the work done there was thorough.
Yeah. Barring, of course, the court challenges that are ongoing as FlySafair, are you willing to subject yourself to a transparent parliamentary process? In other words, bringing yourself formally before Parliament to take up these issues and open your books and really be transparent to them?
Look, I can't speak on behalf of the entire board and the company in this context. It's certainly something we will consider. But what I can tell you is that, again, off the back of an existing case that happened with the Competition Commission, and this is certainly the organ that is being proposed by the Parliamentary Committee as the appropriate one with which to address this matter, we have opened our books wholeheartedly to them, equally to the councils through the processes that are going on there, and they've been reviewed. There's absolutely nothing to hide. So I would see no reservation on that basis.
Yeah. How do you benchmark, I suppose, what would be a budget airline? I mean, in the context of the analysis of an average round trip and how that price would be, for example, if you were to use other forms or other modes of transport to say, well, this is a fair enough price.
Right. So, I mean, a low-cost airline or a budget airline, as we're calling it, is actually really around the actual operating model that you have. The intention is to lower the cost to be able to get a passenger onto a seat. And so one of the things that we do is unbundle the fare, and we take out anything that could be deemed to be an added extra in order to create that lowest barrier of entry as possible. So you're looking at a very basic service, and in our instance, it's one that we obviously hold very dear as being very good in terms of your on-time performance. There are also several other tenets to the low-cost business model which are different to what you might find in a network or a full service carrier. So for example, we focus very intently on flying one aircraft type that allows us economies of scale. It means that we only have to train crew around a specific aircraft type. We also make sure that we are on time all of the time. That's very important. That maintains, keeps our costs low and ensures that we do the right thing. We run the most efficient schedule we can do so that we really maximize our utilization of our metal and make sure that we've got everything going on there. We hire great pilots and we pay them well. That means that we hold on to them and we don't have to train them frequently. So there are a lot of basic things that go into this idea of running this business as efficiently as you can, which changes our approach to what we do, because we look for volume with very thin margins, as opposed to something which might be a network carrier or a legacy carrier who might not necessarily be chasing the same amount of volume, but would look for a slightly higher margin for a more complete service, if I can call it that.
Okay, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Chief Marketing Officer at FlySafair. That's Kirby Gordon.